Hello everyone, this is Pixie. In today's video we're going to take a look at this little demo I put together of Aria of Sorrow on the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis. As I'm sure most of you are already aware, the original game was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2003. Whenever you port one game from one console to another, you can't help but make some comparisons between the hardware of the two systems, so I'm going to be doing that today with the GBA and the Mega Drive. Now, comparing a 32-bit console that released in 2001 to a 16-bit console that released in 1988 might not seem a very fair comparison. And in most aspects that assumption will be correct. The GBA does hold an advantage in many different areas, in most different areas in fact. For example, it has more background layers, you can do more sprites, it has more colours on the screen at the same time, plus you can do all sorts of scaling and rotation effects too with no problem at all. However, the fact that the GBA was a handheld console does mean that the Mega Drive does hold a certain advantage in one or two aspects which I will explore in this video today. Regular viewers of this channel will know that I'm currently in the process of porting another Castlevania game to the Mega Drive, Symphony of the Night. And before we move on and take a look at Aria of Sorrow, I should probably say a few words about the Symphony of the Night project, just in case there's anyone out there who really thinks I'm crazy enough to start another huge Castlevania project when I'm already in the middle of the other one. This little Aria mini project started very simply where I was playing the game for the very first time earlier this year because everyone says that it's almost like a sequel to Symphony of the Night, so I was very curious to play it and I couldn't help but wonder how some of the scenes would look on the Mega Drive. So I simply took some of the graphics from one of the sections, the clock tower, and changed all the colours and everything and ported it to the Mega Drive just to see how it would look. Move forward a few months later and I've been busy preparing for this year's Christmas demo. Our pixel artist for the project, Paran's already sent me some new graphics for the Royal Chapel area as well as a really neat new title screen and character select screen. While Paran's been working very hard and putting a lot of effort to try and get me as many graphical assets as he can, I know that he's been really busy with work and other stuff recently, so for the upcoming Christmas demo, I don't think we're going to have much more new apart from the Royal Chapel level. I think it's very normal for these hobbyist projects where you've got lots of people working on a game at the same time that during certain periods some people can be more busy than others. So for example, towards the beginning of the project I think I was the more busy one, having a new job and other stuff going on, as well as the fact that I had to learn lots of programming stuff before I could get all the graphics that Paran kept sending me into the game. Thankfully he was very patient with me despite me taking so long to get stuff done, and of course I'm going to return the favour here. If you recall last year's demo, you would know that there were a few runes where I didn't have the graphical assets yet, and what I did was I put some placeholder graphics in place, some rather ugly placeholder graphics, but it was enough for me to get the gameplay across and also to put some enemies in there. But I did think about doing that for this year's demo. I thought having many rooms that looked like this didn't really give a good impression of the game. So what I thought a better idea was to go back to my Aria of Sorrow work and instead to create some Aria of Sorrow backgrounds that I can use instead, and then I can then put the Symphony of the Night enemies against that, so I can at least get the AI for the enemies in place, so that when the assets for Symphony of the Night are complete, I can then simply drop the enemies in there, so it'll be a very quick process. So basically that's what this Aria of Sorrow project is right now. It's just a little playground that I can use to, instead of using these ugly placeholder graphics, where I can just put some AI enemies in there and test them out, some Symphony of the Night AI enemies and bosses, and then once the graphics for those Symphony of the Night levels are ready, I can simply drop the AIs in there. And as you can tell by looking at the Aria of Sorrow castle map here, a lot of the areas of the Aria of Sorrow castle are actually very analogous to the ones in Symphony of the Night. For example, the underground cemetery in Aria of Sorrow is very similar to the catacombs. However, there are still very big differences between them, and you'll see this a lot when comparing different areas of the Aria castle with the Symphony of the Night castle. Of course, there are still a lot of differences between the two, and as you just flick through the catacombs here and flick back to the underground cemetery, they'll be very obvious. Apart from the colours in Aria of Sorrow being much brighter to make up for the fact that the early models of the GBA didn't have a backlit screen, they also tend to use fewer colours generally, which makes converting them to the Mega Drive much easier than with the Symphony of the Night graphics. In addition to this, the number of unique tiles used in Aria of Sorrow are much less than in the PlayStation game. This probably shouldn't be too surprising considering the PlayStation had 1 MB of VRAM, whereas the GBA only had 96 KB of VRAM. That's still 32 KB more than the Mega Drive has, but thankfully they don't use that much on a per level basis, so unlike with Symphony of the Night, squeezing all the unique tiles into VRAM on the Mega Drive isn't much of a problem. In fact, for the Mega Drive version of the Underground Cemetery that I did here, you can see that I actually added some details, I added some unique tiles. Especially when compared to the Catacombs, I think the Underground Cemetery is a bit too plain. So I took some of the details from Symphony of the Night, from the catacombs, from the skeletons and the crosses, and I put them into the underground cemetery, and I think it looks a lot better that way. Okay, let's see more of the game in action on the Mega Drive. I really love this hallway from Aria of Sorrow. What could have just been a very boring kind of brick hallway, because of the broken bricks and the huge moon behind it, suddenly becomes like a really beautiful example of parallax scrolling. One of the advantages that the GBA has over the Mega Drive is the fact that it has 4 layers of background scrolling, whereas the Mega Drive only has 2. So in this case, just as with Symphony of the Night, I've used some background sprites in combination with tile scrolling to create the illusion of 3 layers here. As well as the number of background layers, the GBA also had an advantage over the Mega Drive in terms of the number of colours that could be displayed at the same time. The Mega Drive only has 4 palettes of 15 colours each, plus a background colour, giving a total of 61 colours. As I understand it, in normal gameplay modes, the GBA can display 256 colours for the backgrounds, plus an extra 256 for the sprites. In addition to this, the Mega Drive only has 512 colours in total to choose from, so the master palette is quite small, and so it means that the graphics tend to be quite high contrast, whereas the GBA has over 32,000 it can choose from. While I'm quite happy with how the other areas turned out, this is one particular area that I'm showing you here, the 2 versions of it, where I was never very happy with. I think the contrast is a bit too much, especially with this blue background here, so this was a very difficult one. I think this one was a bit of a failure. This is an alternative version of the first corridor I did, but this time we have the more pink walls rather than the green ones. So let me know if you prefer this colour scheme or the other one. Obviously the bottom of the moon is missing on this one. The sprite I didn't put it in just so you can see how the effect is achieved a bit more clearly, but I'm not sure if I prefer the green or the pink walls, so let me know what you think. I said before about that little corridor with the red windows where I tried the blue and the grey background. I didn't quite like so much, but this is one that I think turned out quite well, the underground cemetery that we looked at before. So we have a lot more higher contrast than the Game Boy Advance version between the blue foreground and the more kind of dark greenish background. In this room, I've put one of the enemies I've been working on recently, and actually I've been doing quite a lot of work the past couple of weeks on different catacombs enemies, because I think that's an area that has lots of really fun different characters. It also happens to have quite a lot of scaling and rotating enemies, which make them quite difficult to do. So if this green slime, for example, I pretty much had to draw entirely new animations because it's really hard to do that kind of scaling on the Mega Drive. So this is like a first draft. Maybe I'll change the enemy behavior a bit later, but the enemies, these slimes in the original, are a little bit too easy to defeat. Here I've disabled Alucard's hitbox just so he can't get up, so I want to observe the enemy behavior. You can see if I hit him here, he'll then shrink down and disappear, so that's very much a work in progress, but lots of fun enemies in the catacombs, which I look forward to showing you in a later date. Reducing the colour count for the library section here was quite difficult, but in the end I think the result ends up very similar to the GBA version. I think Aria of Sorrow is mostly just scaled and rotated sprites, but of course the PlayStation Symphony of the Night has lots of these polygonal objects too. Of course there's no way the Mega Drive can do any kind of textured polygons, so these are just sprite animations. I actually have some interesting ideas of what might work for these book enemies, because I think in the original game they're a little bit too easy to fight, so I think I've got quite an interesting idea, but I'll just show you these basic animations now. I won't spoil it. You can play against these in the Christmas demo and you can let me know what you think. One advantage the Mega Drive has over the GBA, which I haven't mentioned yet, is the resolution. So the GBA has a horizontal resolution of 240 pixels and a vertical resolution of 160. The Mega Drive can choose between 2 resolutions, 320 by 224 or 256 by 224. For this particular demo, I've decided to go with the 320 by 224. This gives the Mega Drive a horizontal resolution of maybe around just over 30% more and a vertical resolution over 40% more than the GBA. And overall, I think this gives the Mega Drive version a much more crisp and less pixelated presentation. The increased vertical resolution in particular does create some issues though. You have these gaps in the top and bottom of the original artwork which you have to fit in somehow, so you can simply fit in the colour like I've done here, but given Alucard's greater height, I normally have to take the middle and split it and then shift it and then add some more kind of tiles in between, so it's better that I shift it up from the middle rather than fit it in, otherwise a lot of the doorways will be too short for Alucard to fit under. If you think that another solution would be to take the actual graphics and simply stretch them to fit the new resolution, then that won't work at all, because not only do you distort the original graphics, but it means that the collision grid is out of whack too. They should be in 16 by 16 tiles, but now as you can see here it doesn't work. I've just been using Symphony of the Night characters in my little Aria of Sorrow demo, but if anyone's out there is crazy enough to actually want to do a real proper Aria of Sorrow port to the Mega Drive, then you're going to have to deal with the fact that the characters are a lot smaller than you'll normally see in a 16-bit Castlevania game. Simply stretching the sprite like this to the correct size will create lots of distortion, which will mean that every single frame will have to be retouched. And given how many frames of animation there are in the game, that will take a very long time, so I would probably recommend just sticking with the original small sprites, which I think will probably look okay on the Mega Drive anyway. Apart from the resolution, another extra advantage the Mega Drive might have is in the sound department, because the GBA sound system will sound very anemic, and despite the Aria of Sorrow music being really great, it didn't really sound that great on the GBA itself. As Savage Regime here shows in his cover of Clock Tower, I think this soundtrack has lots of potential in the right hands. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. Thanks very much for watching, and if you're interested in this type of content, then please subscribe to the channel.
I'm interested in this.
Working on this and GG Shinobi and my other projects as well as the tutorials obviously takes quite a lot of time and effort, so I have a Patreon account and any support is much appreciated.
You won't go unrewarded.
Until next time,
farewell.